Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today, I'm going to read to you a presentation that I made, I think it was sometime in 1996, at Interplay on how to build a motivated team. I mentioned this in a previous video. I didn't have the presentation for years. I just had the notes I used to write it. But a few years ago, an ex coworker from Interplay approached me and he had a printed copy of my talk. So I have the actual thing that I presented, and I wrote a preface to it because this is written 27 years ago. I think I was 30 years old. It was my first and last time being a producer. So I thought this needed a little introduction. So I'll read you the introduction and then I'll do the presentation. So here we go. So sometime in late 96, Brian Fargo asked me to address the other producers in our regular producer meeting. He liked how I was running my Fallout project, and he said he was equally impressed with the high morale of the team. He asked me to talk about how I managed to do that when many of the other producers were complaining to him of low team morale and low work ethic. Bear in mind when reading this, I don't consider myself to be a particularly good producer then or now. But the bar was low for good production at Interplay, not because the producers weren't trying, but because we had absolutely no training. In fact, when I asked the executive producer there for training, he said that's not how they did things. They just threw people in the pool to see who could swim. Well, I didn't think being held up as an example of a great producer was a good idea for me, but it was something I didn't understand at the time. And the document below will show that my understanding of the role was superficial at best. This document is not an example of good production guidelines. It's a time capsule that shows what great production was considered to be at Interplay in the mid-90s. We've come a long way since then. Anyway, back then I wasn't sure exactly why my team was doing so well, so I decided to ask them. I got a lot of feedback from them, and this is the document I wrote. It's called How to Build a Motivated Team by Timothy Kane, GURPS project leader. By the way, we lost GURPS about 2 or 3 months after I wrote this. This report aims to provide producers with a set of instructions for building a large, motivated in-house team and getting them to produce high-quality software. Like any new endeavor, you should start by making some personal decisions, such as asking yourself what kind of project you want. Then you can select a group of people and organize them into a team that is willing and able to make that game. And finally, you can keep that team running smoothly with a few basic management techniques. You'll find yourself rewarded with a great game. 1. Start with yourself. Before embarking on any new project, you should decide what genre you want to work in. Do you want to make a role-playing game, or an arcade shooter, or a strategy game? Make sure you understand that genre and have played a lot of games that our industry has produced. Your new game will have to compete with every other game on the market. Don't limit yourself to just researching PC games. Look at the Mac market, stand-up arcade games, and even pencil and paper games if it's appropriate. You never know what may trigger the next great idea. Next, pick a project that you like. Few things are more demoralizing to a team than to work on a project whose producer doesn't care about it. This means you should complain loudly if you're assigned to a project you don't like. Don't assume you'll grow to like it. Most projects, even the most desirable, become tedious at the very end, and if you don't like the project at its conception, you never will. Don't take on too many projects at once. In an ideal world, each producer would only have one product at a time. Since most of you need to produce multiple titles at the same time, try to concentrate your creative energies on just one of them. Perhaps the others will suffer and become B-grade titles, but you cannot devote yourself to more than one A-grade title at a time. More importantly, your team won't operate very well with your divided attention. You can only be part of one team. If you find yourself with several potentially stellar projects, complain to Alan. That was Alan, the executive producer. You should assign the extra projects to other producers for your sake and for the products. Finally, create a clear design specification for your game. This specification could be a written document, or it could be a storyboard, or even a prototype engine. Not only will it help you anticipate your resource needs, but a specification also shows that you're planning the game you're planning to make and may help attract resources to your project. If you don't feel up to making the design specification yourself, get a competent designer and have him make one for you. Which leads me to number 2, get the people. Once you pick the project, it's time to pick the people. Or better yet, let the people pick you. Teams seem to work better at Interplay if their members asked to be part of the project rather than they were assigned to it. This factor is so important that it might be wise to wait a few months for someone to finish their current project rather than just take whoever's available at the time. You can use that waiting time to finish your design specification anyway. When looking to fill a specific job, don't necessarily take the first person you find who's best suited for that particular job. Instead, look for well-rounded people who can do more than the specific task at hand. These people will serve you better when later in the project, unforeseen tasks arise. This means you should look for people who aren't afraid to try new things. When Leonard Borarsky joined the GURPS team as lead artist, he wanted to try using clay heads in our encounter window, despite having never worked with clay before. The technique would require us to invent the process of molding the heads, scanning them into 3D models, adding different facial features such as hair and eyes, and animating the final images. But the results were the coolest looking heads since Max Headroom first aired, all because Leonard wanted to try something new. Another important trait to look for in potential team members is the catalyst. The book Peopleware by Lister and DeMarco describes catalyst employees as those employees who make teams gel or work smoothly and efficiently together. A catalyst isn't necessarily the best worker at his or her own job, but a catalyst can make the other people in the team better at their jobs. They do this by understanding the other members' jobs and coordinating their efforts. Often the producer's the catalyst, but this doesn't have to be so. Jason Taylor was a catalyst on the GURPS project. Because he programmed and also used art utilities, he understood how 3D art was translated into the game's art specifications and how the game's animation code worked. He would often suggest changes to the art or to the code that would make the animation look smoother or use less memory. He would also organize the art specified by the designer so that the most important work was done earlier than the fluff art, and that similar art was done at the same time to promote a consistency of look and feel throughout the game. Typically, Jason would save us man-months of time by spending an afternoon thinking about the code and art together rather than as separate parts of the game. Of all your concerns while trying to put together your team, the most important is to make sure you get enough people to meet the project needs, and no more than that. If you get too few people, they'll be overworked and frustrated. But if you get too many, which is highly unlikely at Interplay, the project will be a coordination nightmare, and some people will be left with too little to do. Ultimately, Alan will approve of your choices, and if you won't approve of enough people you need, then reduce the scope of your project. In other words, if Alan will only give you one egg, don't make an omelet. Where do you get your people? Projects are finishing in Interplay all the time, and you only need 1 or 2 people to get started. While programmers can be difficult to obtain, talk to Jay Patel for suggestions on in-house programmers or for new ones to hire. If you go to Todd Kamasta or the other art directors with your design specifications, which you did make one, right? An explicit list of art you need, you'll be much more likely to get artists you need. After you get started with just a few people, others may ask to join later. Remember, people who ask to be on your project are coming to you pre-motivated. Take advantage of this. 3. Set up the team. Now that you have your people, you need to arrange them into a coherent team. Most projects at Interplay are set up as a hierarchy with the producer at top and the 3 leads, programmer, designer, and artist, coordinated the work in their areas and answering to the producer. While this setup is traditional, Team GURPS has tried a different approach. Team GURPS has no producer, really. I code most of the GURPS-related programming, the hex-based isometric engine, the combat routines, the character skills and advantages, while overseeing the work of other programmers who handle scripting, interface, and code optimization. Leonard's art sets the tone for the look of the game, and he manages the work of 3 other artists. Between the 2 of us and the designers, we work out the details of the storyline, the characters, and the dialogue. Fred Hatch, the team's line producer, handles a lot of internal coordination, such as checking dialogue and storyline for consistency, for processing art for inclusion in the game. He and I together handle the interaction of the project with Interplay and the world through regular project reports, schedules, and contracts. Of course, anyone can make suggestions and point out problems in the game's design. In fact, everyone on the team should be encouraged to take part in multiple roles during the project's creation. Programmers and artists should feel free to add their ideas to the design of the game, and designers should feel free to suggest art styles or try to push the coding to the technological edge. Of course, the final decision lies with the lead of that area, but implementing the suggestions of a team member is highly motivating. People love to see their ideas come alive. Physical proximity of the team is also important. The team offices should be near each other, and offices should be shared by those people working on the same part of the game. Grouping designers with designers and artists with artists will encourage ideas to be shared and make sure designs stay consistent. 4. Run the team. By this time, you should have a design specification and a group of people willing and able to implement it. Now what? First, establish a regular weekly meeting. At the beginning of this project, this meeting will serve as a brainstorming session for other game ideas and will get everyone comfortable with working with each other. Later, it will be a forum for discussing problems and issues about the game in an environment where everybody can contribute. Second, make sure that you give people uninterrupted work time. People need a time to just do their own work. Unless it's very important, don't call or drop in on someone for part of the day. Make it a habit to visit after lunch or first thing in the morning or some other particular time. Make sure you are available throughout the day to handle any problems that might arise. Yes, this is a double standard, but you're just going to have to accept the fact that someone has to be available around the clock to coordinate the project. Third, set up deadlines. People seem to work better when they're working towards a milestone, but don't make phony deadlines just to make busy work or pressure your employees. Make sure the person knows why the work needs to be done on that date. For example, the dialogue needs to be done on Wednesday so we can start voice casting, or that explosion needs to be finished next week so we can test combat. Those are good explanations that get people going. Finally, challenge your people. The well-known Hawthorne effect that people perform better when trying something new can be used to your advantage. Encourage new and novel features, especially if the people suggesting them can implement those features themselves. Again, people like to see their own ideas incorporated into the game. They feel like they own part of the game, which of course they do. And once they've established this ownership, they strive to make the whole game great because nobody wants to be associated with a terrible game. Now, there are some things to look out for. There are pitfalls to working on a big team. Some people like working in large groups because their work becomes anonymous. No one person is responsible for a given feature, so those people hide in your team and do very little work or very low quality work. You need to watch out for these people because they will destroy your team's morale. Also remember that peer pressure can be good and bad. It's good when it drives team members to higher quality. It's bad when it makes people feel like outcasts inside the group. And maintaining a good environment is your responsibility as producer, and this environment is more than good chairs and fast computers. Try to make friendly and constructive comments and keep the team cohesive. Finally, keep an eye on your attitude. It is possible to work hard and enjoy yourself at the same time. Love your game, like your people, and have a good time. We're making games together, and that's supposed to be fun. And there you have it. I wrote that in 1996. I gave it to all the producers during an offsite meeting, and it was pretty well received, but I was right back to work the next day. So I hope you liked it, that little time capsule of production at Interplay in the mid-90s.